In the middle of Southeast Asia, there's a capital city that looks like it was built for a massive, futuristic population boom. Highways so wide they feel like airport runways. Luxury hotels polished and waiting for guests who rarely arrive. Government complexes spread across vast distances. Entire neighborhoods that feel paused. This is a city designed for millions, yet most of it is eerily empty. So why does a country build a mega capital, and then barely live in it? This isn't an abandoned city. It isn't a ruin. It isn't a failed experiment that was later forgotten. It is the official capital of a modern nation, Naypyidaw, built from scratch on a greenfield site in central Myanmar. And its scale is staggering. Naypyidaw covers roughly 7,054 square kilometers, larger by land area than many of the world's most famous cities. In pure size, it rivals or exceeds places that support tens of millions of people. But here's the twist. The population doesn't match the design. Depending on how you measure it, city proper versus metropolitan area, population estimates usually land under or around 1 million. That gap between capacity and reality is what gives the city its unsettling reputation as a ghost megacity. The first thing almost everyone notices is the roads. Naypyidaw's boulevards are enormous. Some stretches are reported to be up to 20 lanes wide, complete with medians, service roads, and landscape dividers. And yet, they're often nearly empty. Not because the city is broken. Not because it's falling apart. But because it was designed for a future that hasn't arrived. The road design itself feels unusual. Massive roundabouts. Long, straight stretches. Sudden merges. The layout feels optimized for movement, vehicles flowing cleanly from one zone to another rather than for street life. You can drive for minutes on flawless asphalt, past perfectly maintained infrastructure, and see almost no one. No crowds. No congestion. No sense of urgency. Most capitals grow organically. They start dense. They develop markets. Neighborhoods blend into one another. Street life emerges naturally. People walk, gather, argue, trade, and socialize. Naypyidaw feels different because it wasn't allowed to grow that way. It was planned from the top down as a series of zones. Separate areas for government ministries, military facilities, hotels, housing, and services. Each zone has a function, but little overlap. That zoning makes the city feel like a collection of components rather than a single living organism. Even residential life was tightly structured. Housing was allocated based on employment, rank, and role within the state. Entire neighborhoods were assigned to specific categories of workers. Stories of color-coded roofs signaling status or function became part of the city's mythology. Instead of mixed neighborhoods, you get separation. Instead of spontaneous interaction, you get distance. And when people don't naturally bump into each other, cities don't feel alive. To understand why Naypyidaw exists at all, you have to look backward at the old capital. For decades, Myanmar's political, economic, and cultural center was Yangon. It was dense, active, and deeply embedded in the country's daily life. But in the early 2000s, Myanmar's leadership made a radical decision. They would move the capital. Construction on a brand new city reportedly began around 2002, and in 2005, government ministries were abruptly relocated inland to Naypyidaw, often with little public explanation. The official justification was administrative. A planned city. More space. Less congestion. Better infrastructure for long-term governance. But observers and analysts have long argued that those reasons don't tell the whole story. The most commonly cited explanation is security. An inland capital is harder to surround. Harder to blockade. Harder for large-scale protests to pressure leadership the way dense coastal cities can. Wide roads reduce choke points. Open spaces make mass gatherings harder to sustain. Separated zones limit how unrest spreads. In other words, Naypyidaw wasn't designed primarily to feel vibrant. It was designed to be manageable. Some analyses emphasize strategic geography and tradition, placing power in a more central, symbolic heartland location. Others note that the city's design aligns closely with military logic: space, separation, visibility, and control. And while rumors of astrology and timing persist, most serious observers agree the move was fundamentally political and strategic, not mystical. That explains something crucial about Naypyidaw's atmosphere. It doesn't feel like it was built to be loved. It feels like it was built to function. And that difference matters. Here's what makes Naypyidaw especially eerie: it's maintained. This is not decay. The grass is trimmed. The roads are clean. The buildings are intact. The lights work. The city isn't dying, it's waiting. But cities need more than infrastructure to thrive. They need friction. They need people walking instead of driving. They need small businesses competing. They need chance encounters and crowded sidewalks. They need reasons for people to stay after work. A city can have flawless roads and still feel empty if it lacks the everyday incentives that pull people in. And moving a capital doesn't automatically move a country's economy. Universities don't instantly relocate. Businesses don't follow by default. Culture doesn't migrate on command. Yangon remained the economic and cultural magnet. Opportunity stayed where people already were. Naypyidaw became an administrative machine, necessary, functional, but disconnected from daily life for most citizens. That's why so much of the city feels oversized. The hotels were built in anticipation. The roads were laid for traffic that never came. The districts were mapped for growth that stalled. If you dropped someone into Naypyidaw without context, they might think they were standing in a movie set for a future metropolis. Everything feels scaled up: roads, buildings, empty space. But the emptiness isn't a mystery once you understand what the city really is. Naypyidaw is not a failed city. It's a purpose-built seat of power. Built quickly, built huge, built inland, and built to prioritize control and continuity over organic growth. That's why its size remains one of its strangest features. It looks ready for millions. But daily life suggests a fraction of that. And that mismatch is what unsettles people. Naypyidaw is proof that cities are more than concrete and planning documents. They're magnets. They pull people with jobs, culture, convenience, relationships, and opportunity. Without those forces, even the most ambitious urban design can feel hollow. This capital was built like a fortress and a blueprint at the same time. And that's why it feels so strange. It's a city designed for the future that still hasn't found its present. And that unresolved tension is what makes Naypyidaw so fascinating. Most cities either grow into their size or fail and shrink back. Naypyidaw sits in between. It exists at full scale, but without the social gravity that normally fills a capital. It functions every day, yet rarely feels busy. It governs a nation, yet feels distant from the nation's emotional center. In a way, the city reflects the mindset that created it. Long-term, cautious, centralized, and deeply focused on stability over spontaneity. It prioritizes order over energy, control over chaos, and preparedness over organic growth. Whether Naypyidaw will eventually grow into the population it was built for or remain permanently oversized is still an open question. That uncertainty is part of its identity. Because Naypyidaw isn't empty by accident. It's empty by design. And that makes it one of the most unusual capitals on Earth.